Okay, so procedures. Today's topic is about we have three topics for today. The first one we're going to deal with is procedures. So before we take a deep dive into procedures, I would like you to think of some of the procedures in your classroom that you expect your students to know and follow. And if you can either turn your mic on if you feel like you want to exercise your voice this morning, or if you want to exercise your fingers, go ahead and type it in the chat box. What is a procedure you expect your students to know and follow? Morning routines, yep. Transitioning. How to enter the classroom. Morning business and closing business, morning routines. Oh, asking how to go to the bathroom. Raising hands. Type the daily journal on arrival. Get computers and begin daily journal. Morning business. And completing the warm-ups when they walk in. Nice. Nice. I would like to add on whoever said how to enter the classroom. I'd like to add on to that and say how to stand in the hallway. Because at my school, a lot of teachers have their sixth graders stand out in the hallway. And that's one procedure we have to teach the kids, is what the expectation is of when you're out in the hallway. Oh, carpet expectations, yes. There's so much excitement at lunch and recess that one becomes an easy to overlook procedure, especially for the kids. Yeah, even walking through the school. Yep. All righty. So here's our agenda for today, our three sessions. Module 5 is broken into two components. We have 5A, which is procedures, and then we have 5B, which is classroom organization. And just a quick little note on classroom organization. I put a little note in there if you could have a map of your classroom. And if you don't have a detailed map, when we take a break or before we get to module 5, if you can just have a quick sketch of your classroom and where the key components are, that would be great, because you will need that as we move forward in 5B, classroom organization. We will then talk about the portfolio entry for module 5. And then we will move into module 6, which is bell work and sponge activities, and then also that portfolio entry. And I know some of you guys have mentioned that you have an incredibly busy day, and thank you for everybody who emailed us to kind of keep us updated on your crazy schedule, for lack of better words. We totally understand, and we greatly appreciate any time that you were able to give us today. And if you have to leave at any time, please be sure to watch the video that we post, because that will help you with all the details of the things that you weren't able to catch in the live session. Also, that being said, if you're here for the whole sessions, also go back and watch the videos, because there may have been something that you didn't quite catch, or that you want to just double up on your hearing from. Okay. Okay, would somebody like to read this quote for me, please, with their mic on?
I can.
Thank you.
Effective teachers manage their classrooms. Ineffective teachers discipline their classrooms. Harry Wong.
So this is by Harry Wong. Many of you might be familiar with his book, The First Days of Schools. I would like you to think about, do you agree or disagree with this quote? When you think about it, as we read the quote, if you agree or disagree. what does this quote mean to you? And then in the chat, tell me how this quote translates into action. How does this translate into action? Effective teachers manage their classroom. Ineffective teachers discipline their classroom. And if your fingers are typed from all the typing you guys have done this morning, feel free to turn your microphone on and share. Yes, Amanda, effective teachers are proactive and ineffective are reactive. When there is a set routine that students know, they know the expectations. To be effective, you need to plan ahead and have management skills and strategies in place and adjust accordingly. Key word, adjust. Effective teachers teach students procedures and routines. They teach students how to learn together. Okay. And lastly, I would like you guys to comment on one of your classmates' shared thoughts. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to do this. So typically, if we were in a, you can go ahead and start typing or keep thinking about what you're going to type in the chat box. Typically, I would use the think, pair, share square for this, and I would have students chit chat together, and then I would have them turn and talk to another two students, and then I would pick a couple random groups to share out. To expect them to magically know, yes. The second part of his question, I think this is more in student when students become unmanageable. Interesting, Jennifer. Yeah, it becomes a balance. Yeah, I can agree with what you're saying, because when I have to use discipline, does that make me ineffective? I don't think so. Interesting. Jackie and Christy, I think Jessica is one of the first to disagree with this quote in all of our years of teaching, but it's a very interesting point.
Yeah, if I could just explain that just a little
Please.
bit. I like to believe that I have good classroom management, and a lot of the things do really work well with all the kids, but there are some wild cards. And so in those types of situations, I'm not going to blame myself, like, oh, because I'm not managing my classroom well enough, this one child is continuing to have problems. So I hope that's not like an ego thing that I'm talking about, but I think everybody is kind of thinking it is a balance. But I do believe that like organized and like kids, when they know what to expect, they really do become they know how to behave. But then you do always have those one or two kids who need that little bit extra, and then it opens up a lot bigger conversation of what is appropriate. And I think that's why we're all here, is try to also figure that out so we can get better at managing.
Yeah, very well said, Jessica. Christy, would you like to add something?
Oh no, I was just gonna say I get where you're coming from, Jessica, because you're right, especially now that, they're putting all the kids in Gen Ed too, with, trying to incorporate a lot of inclusion. It gets tough, and sometimes you do have to, you know, I guess, I guess kind of take care with a little bit of discipline, kind of teaches them a little bit too. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah. Yes, yes. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Jessica, for sharing. But sometimes I have to discipline, but not the entire class. Yes. Yeah, I can agree. Great points, everyone. Okay. So many of you guys have already done this, so thank you very much. I wanted to kind of preserve some of our time together today and use it in a different way. Typically, we would give you time to review these supplemental resources while we're together. But I wanted to, oh, I've got to fix that one. Sorry, it looks so wonky. I wanted to give you guys time to do this outside of class on your own time. So there's a link posted in the Google Classroom. It's also linked right here. And it will take you to the Google Classroom, and there you will click on the readings. And I ask you in the Google Classroom to share something you learned from your readings. So like I said, thank you to those of you who have done that. And if the rest of you guys over the next week or so, while the procedures are still fresh in your mind, if you could go ahead and contribute to that conversation. The directions are, please leave a comment below on one thing you have that you have or will try in your classroom. Okay. Jackie, how are we doing on the breakout rooms?
We're good. We're ready.
Okay, sweet. Okay. This next activity, so I'm so glad everyone is here to participate in this. And what this is you will find, I'll walk you through this a little bit first. Maybe if I can get there. Bear with me one moment. So on the slides, you will see your name under a room, okay? And Jackie, when she opens up the rooms, you will go to your assigned room. Prior to doing that, you will click on wherever your room is, and you will open up your slide. Once in your slide, you will see, excuse me, you will see it's a card sort activity. Let me do a present so we can see a bigger view. Okay, so the second slide, these are movable cards. You are going to categorize these cards into meaningful groups. And you need to be, when we come back together, you need to be ready to explain your classification system. On the third slide, I've provided extra workspace if necessary. You can organize them, color code them, do whatever you want. You can manipulate these guys however you want to organize them. Move them over here. I suggested 3 groups, but if you feel that there's 4 or 5, go ahead and do that instead. Okay, so in your groups, you're going to read the cards. You're going to categorize the cards into meaningful groups. Then you are going to give me a label or identify how you group them. And then when we come back together in 20 minutes, we'll talk about your classifications. Questions for me? And you can see that Christy posted the link to this breakout slide in our chat box. Thank you, Christy. Okay, so if one more thing before I ask Jackie to open up the room, there will be 4 or 5 breakout rooms. So if you have questions, please just raise your hand. I think there's like a little thing at the very top of the screen that will say ask for help. Okay, so if you need some help, ask for help and we'll come on over and help you. Otherwise, we'll try and pop in and just kind of check in on your conversation and eavesdrop, basically. Okay? All right, thanks, Jackie. Okay, everyone, welcome back. So I think the way we left it was we said be prepared to share. Be prepared to discuss your classifications. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like you guys are over talkative this morning. So I think we just need a little bit more quiet time. No, I'm really kidding. You guys are really quiet this morning. So what I'm going to ask that you guys do is one person from each group, just one person, share your screen of your slides. And we're going to give everybody a couple minutes just to review and either vocally make comments or type comments in the chat box. So we'll go through all 4 levels. We had high school, middle school, upper elementary, lower elementary, 5 groups, and then middle elementary. Okay, so whoever wants to start, go ahead and start.
Anyone can start.
Thank you.
Share tab.
Can everybody see that okay? Okay, perfect. Great.
Awesome. A little bit about what we were talking about, where we had a discussion between the rules and expectations, because sometimes they kind of mesh into one. So it's kind of hard to differentiate what were the difference between rules and expectations, especially when we're thinking about our littles. So what we got was the rules are specific of what we want them to do. They're more towards action, where expectations are geared more to their behaviors. And that's what we got.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments for room 4, lower ed? Okay. Would somebody else like to share?
I can go. Grade, what were we? Upper L, I think.
I think so. Yeah, upper L. Thanks, Cassie.
Okay. Do you need me to share my screen? Sorry. Do I share my screen with
If
it?
you would, that
Okay.
would be great.
Let's
Just so everybody can start kind of
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
the visualizing of how everybody's sorted.
my window. Sorry.
You're fine.
Come on, share here. Tab. Here it is. I have too many tabs up. Here it is. Okay.
There we go.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
So what we had said is comment from the last one is we agree. We kind of had the same problem of what was the difference between rules and expectations, kind of, because we were kind of they were kind of meshing together. So what we had kind of decided being in being in elementary period, is they come in with needing to be taught a lot. So that's going to be whatever is taught is going to be more routines, what we have to teach them. Things that they should be coming up with already is going to be an expectation, and things that are kind of set for maybe the whole school would be more of like a rule. So obey the rules. We should be kind to everyone, show respect to property no matter where you are in the school. A routine, especially coming in at K, they probably would have a lot more in routines because they're going to have to teach a lot. We thought coming up to, an upper L, they should know to keep their hands and feet to themselves, use inside voices, and then routines would be what we'd be teaching, and hopefully by the end of the year, those would all be expectations already too.
Great. Thank you. Any comments for upper L? Okay, thanks so much for sharing. Next.
Room 3 can go.
Thank you.
Alice, do you want me to present my screen?
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so kind of the same as others. When reading the cards, we realized that there were 3 main categories. So the 3 of us, we were saying that school-wide expectations was one of them, classroom expectations was another, and the last one was behavioral expectations. So when we were talking with each other, there was a lot of like, oh, does it go here? Does it go there? But then we came to like an agreement that a lot of this was classroom expectations, and a lot of them were also behavioral expectations. And there were a few that were school-wide expectations, mostly because like this is what we hope that the school would want the kids to know. And yeah, that's it.
Cool. Nice. I like how you guys, this is something unique too I haven't seen in the past, was that they're all expectations, but just in kind of different ways. So nice. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Everybody's doing a great job so far. Well, everybody did a great job. So thank you. Okay, next.
We can go.
Sweet. Thanks.
We were room 1.
Okay, Ashley.
Let me share this. Did I do that right?
Yeah, something's happening.
Okay. Can
There
you
we
see
go.
it?
We got it. Yes.
Okay, so we did ours. The left is all what we thought were procedures and what to do while you're in the class. The middle was all our behavior expectations, all the general rules. And then we got fixated on, we don't know what that always set the beam back to 0 meant. So we put it in a miscellaneous because we didn't know. And then we tried Googling it, and we're like, it just talks about balance beams. So we didn't know.
So that's science uses the triple beam balance.
What does it mean? Like,
So there's riders on the triple beam balance, and before the students start moving it around and carrying it and lifting it, they actually have to move all of these riders back to 0. So
it's like an actual, like
yeah.
we were thinking was like set yourself back to 0. So
Oh.
we don't know. Like
Yeah.
we didn't know.
Think of a doctor's office scale.
Got it.
That's like the giant version of a triple beam balance scale. Whatever. So like when you get off the doctor scale, they always set it back to 0.
Got it.
Yeah.
I guess we would move that somewhere else now that we know that it's not like setting yourself back to 0 or readjust yourself.
I kind of like that because many kids need that. Reset yourself.
Yeah.
All right. And high school. Thanks, Ryan. I love the red. So the high school put their comments and put their categories in the chat box. And then does anybody have any questions for them? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay. All righty. Okay, so when we did this, we categorized them into we came up with 3 categories: behavioral rules, goal-oriented rules, and procedures. So behavioral rules do not change, and they're always applicable. Goal-oriented rules target or aspirations, and maybe you're not going to hit them every day, right? And then procedures is the way of getting the classroom activities done. Tasks and routines, these save time, and they change as needed. I remember somebody in the very beginning said there needs to be the flexibility or the ability to adjust. And yes, procedures will change as the school years go on and as the students' needs change. Okay, so what we know from research about rules and procedures, that last time we learned that involving our students in our rules has many benefits. So it gives them ownerships, it allows them to be reflectful, it provides meaningful connections, there's a greater respect, and there's shared enforcement. So when students are involved in writing and implementing the rules and procedures, there's a stronger sense of self-monitoring as well as peer monitoring. Okay, because every module needs to have one, this is our statistics page. And I would like you guys to review the statistics on this screen and tell me one of your ahas in the chat box. Or you can turn your mic on and share. And if you have a question about it, go ahead and also share that too.
I think this is interesting, especially given what we just had talked about, where there's flexibility because things change throughout the year. But I totally agree with the elementary version.
It makes
Thank you.
sense when they come back from being sick. 'Cause now when they're sick, they're out for days. It makes sense that almost a week. So when they come back, they're different. They're not that much engaged and they're really off task sometimes. And so this makes a lot of sense for elementary.
Great connection. Thank you.
So I try to make everything like real life to them. And I kind of tell them like all the expectations and procedures for the classroom are like going to a new destination. You have to use Google Maps to get there. So all of the procedures and everything are like giving us directions to get where we want to go. So that way they feel like it's not just like someone harping on them, or like there's an actual purpose and a why behind it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any others? All right. Okay, what we also know from research about rules and procedures, that teaching rules and procedures at the beginning of the school year and consistently enforcing them correlates with higher academic achievement. There's a phrase, go slow to go fast, and this is where this applies. I mean, it applies in so many spots, but in the beginning of the school year, I often find myself like, man, I haven't done any content. What's happening here? And then when I think about it, I spend that first month of August and I'm going so slow in my content, maybe just sprinkling it in here and there. But everything else is about procedures and routines. And then by the time, just about this time in the school year, I'm like, whoa, I'm flying. My kids are able to go fast now. And that's because I've taken so much time in the beginning of the school year and established what our procedures are, what our expectations are. And then those procedures start to turn into routines where it becomes automatic in the kids' behavior. And so, especially at the 6th grade, which is the grade level I teach, this is their first year that they are really doing a lot of transitioning between their classes. They're going to 7 different classes. So for me, it's really important that our focus is, or my focus and my team's focus is on our procedures, what our expectations are as we go along. Let's see if we can get the video going. Where is she? Okay, give me one moment. I'm trying to spare you the Canva commercial.
Classroom procedures really are taught basically in the same way that content is taught. Vision of the whole, break it down into parts, teach the parts while connecting those to the whole, check for understanding. And while we all as teachers kind of understand that process as it relates to teaching content, we don't always put that much time.
Oh, sorry.
And effort into teaching our procedures. Because we're often working under the assumption that the kids already know how to raise their hands appropriately, come in and get working silently. And while they may intellectually already know those things, they still need to practice those things, the same way they practice reading and writing and public speaking. So my suggestions for teaching procedures are: start by introducing it. Get specific about what the expectation is for that procedure or routine. And then model it. You go through the steps of the procedure, or fishbowl it, bring up some students and they go through the steps so that the kids see it in action, but in a mini microcosm kind of way. Then have the class actually practice it. If you're practicing or teaching the routine of how to come in and get started for the day, then have them stand up, pretend that the class has just begun, and have them go to their seats and start the warm-up or start the routine the way you want every day. And debrief that. And then have them do it again, and then debrief it again. This kind of practice, the same way we would teach them how to do questioning in a reading or how to summarize a piece of content, we can bring that same structure and that same practice and reinforcement to do the teaching of the key procedures in our classroom that we really need them to do appropriately and effectively every time we ask them to do it. You might also want to add in a visual or nonverbal reinforcement of some kind. So if what I need from them is to raise their hands when they want to ask or answer a question and they're not doing that, I might teach them that procedure, practice that procedure with them, and then have an image or a visual of a student doing it correctly that I can reference when they're doing it incorrectly as a reminder, a visual reminder of what it is that I want from them and what it is we've practiced, so that they can self-correct their behavior around that procedure. Also, when you're practicing the procedure with students, you want to start off practicing it in an accountability-free environment, which means that there would be no consequence for not doing it correctly. For example, if I'm trying to teach my students how to respond to a particular sound signal, which means get quiet and bring your attention back to me, when I introduce it and practice it initially, there won't be any consequence for those students who don't do it correctly, because they're still learning what I want and how I want it. But after a few practices, maybe after an hour or a period if you're teaching secondary, the next day or in the next hour of instruction, I have to be clear with them what the consequences will be for students who don't comply. And then I have to consistently enforce those consequences so that students understand that I'm serious about how I want this and the way it's going to be, so that they all comply the way I want them to comply.
Any of you guys familiar with Grace Dearborn?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like her. I saw her, maybe 5 years ago at the middle school conference, and then our principal happened to bring her in a year later, and the picture thing she talks about is, and it was really helpful. So I'll see if for next session, if I can pull up some examples of that. Okay, so what's the difference between discipline and procedures? Would somebody like to read disciplines for us?
I'll read it.
Thanks, Jessica.
Discipline, how students behave as penalties and rewards, guidelines for observable behavior.
Thank you. And would somebody like to tackle procedures?
I'll go.
Thank you.
Procedures, how things are done, no penalties and rewards, aside from praise.
Okay. So discipline, it's what how students behave. There's penalties and rewards with it, so there are consequences. Procedures is how things are done. All right. So routines are procedures that are well practiced. Okay, so procedures become routines. And procedure is a step to be learned. Procedures are what teachers want done. Routines are what students do automatically. Procedures are an important part of society so that people can function in an acceptable and organized manner. So for example, one of the routines that we all practice every time we get on a plane, it makes no sense to me, is how we board the airplane. This is just my little pet peeve. Why we always board at the front of the plane to the back of the plane. I think the back of the plane should board first because they got to walk past everybody. So that's just my little identification of a backwards routine in my world. But there you go. Okay. All right. So routines are procedures that make instruction flow smoothly. And it takes a lot of practice of those procedures to turn it into a routine. Oftentimes, you're going to have to revisit your routines, procedures, when we come back from breaks. Somebody was saying like, oh, the kids who are absent all the time, if they're absent for a week, they've just missed out on practicing those routines. And absolutely, those kids are going to need those procedures practiced. when we get back from winter break, fall break, spring break. Sometimes I find myself in fourth quarter, that last week of April, first week in May, I'm going through all my procedures again and just having to go slow down a little bit because something's happening. I think there's a little sprinkle of summer happening and the kids just kind of get a little off focus. But reestablishing those procedures seems to help ground them. And I also have to do a little bit of adjusting because there's been a lot of maturity that's happened over the 6 months of the school year. Okay. So when you're teaching a procedure, you are going to, there's a 6-step process. You're going to identify the why, what the expectation for the routine is. So, and are they developmentally appropriate? Is it positively stated? Is it specific? Can you observe it? Okay, so those are the things when you start developing the routine you're going to implement, ask yourself those questions. Number 2, you're going to explain you're going to specifically teach and review the procedure, okay, so that it becomes your routine. Step 3, practice, 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 practice. Give your kids enough practice. Step 4, you're going to provide them feedback. Remember, when we're first starting this is completely safe. There's no negative consequence. All we're giving is positive feedback. But we're also asking the kids to self-evaluate. How did we do with this? What could you guys do that would be better next time? One of the things when when my kids are giving feedback to each other, I expect them to take ownership for their actions, and I never allow them to identify a student by name when they're providing feedback, especially critiquing feedback. So what that might look like in my classroom is I heard somebody moving when they weren't supposed to be moving. I heard talking when there wasn't supposed to be talking. So that's the student owning what they're hearing, right? They're identifying what they heard. Instead of saying, Christy was talking when she wasn't supposed to be. So I make that shift. I don't let them become the tattletale or put the blame on somebody else. Because those kids already who are doing the talking, they know that they're talking. They don't need it to be called out in front of everybody or specifically identified for it. But when I have my students say, I heard the talking, I think it allows the student who is actually talking, they realize the impact that their voice is making and that they are distracting other students. And that maybe what they thought wasn't such a big deal is a little bit bigger because others are hearing it. Okay, so that's the feedback. Provide cues. Provide a visual prompt. Put your rules up or put the picture up of the procedure in the classroom. If part of your procedure is how students walk into the classroom, what does that look like? Can you take pictures of it and put those up in the classroom so students have those visual prompts? If students borrow something from you, markers, pencils, colored pencils, or you have the caddies in the middle, how should those look when the students are done? Take a picture, put it right on the outside of the bin for the kiddos, okay? And then number 6 is review. You're gonna have to reteach this throughout the year. All right, so because we're practicing and we're reteaching, we're gonna watch the Grace Dearborn video again. This time, I think it's the same video. So we're gonna watch that video again, but this time with the lens of the 6 steps now that we've seen them. So we introduced the routine or the how to create a routine by watching the video. We reviewed the steps. Now we're going to rewatch implementing that routine. Okay.
Classroom procedures really are taught basically in the same way that content is taught. Vision of the whole, break it down into parts, teach the parts while connecting those to the whole, check for understanding. And while we all as teachers kind of understand that process as it relates to teaching content, we don't always put that much time and effort into teaching our procedures, because we're often working under the assumption that the kids already know how to raise their hands appropriately, come in and get working silently. And while they may intellectually already know those things, they still need to practice those things, the same way they practice reading and writing and public speaking. So my suggestions for teaching procedures are: start by introducing it. Get specific about what the expectation is for that procedure or routine. And then model it. You go through the steps of the procedure, or fishbowl it. Bring up some students and they go through the steps so that the kids see it in action, but in a mini microcosm kind of way. Then have the class actually practice it. If you're practicing or teaching the routine of how to come in and get started for the day, then have them stand up, pretend that the class has just begun, and have them go to their seats and start the warm-up or start the routine the way you want every day, and debrief that. And then have them do it again, and then debrief it again. This kind of practice, the same way we would teach them how to do questioning in a reading or how to summarize a piece of content, we can bring that same structure and that same practice and reinforcement to the teaching of the key procedures in our classroom that we really need them to do appropriately and effectively every time we ask them to do it. You might also want to add in a visual or nonverbal reinforcement of some kind. So if what I need from them is to raise their hands when they want to ask or answer a question and they're not doing that, I might teach them that procedure, practice that procedure with them, and then have an image or a visual of a student doing it correctly that I can reference when they're doing it incorrectly as a reminder, a visual reminder of what it is that I want from them and what it is we've practiced, so that they can self-correct their behavior around that procedure. Also, when you're practicing the procedure with students, you want to start off practicing it in an accountability-free environment, which means that there would be no consequence for not doing it correctly. For example, if I'm trying to teach my students how to respond to a particular sound signal, which means get quiet and bring your attention back to me, when I introduce it and practice it initially, there won't be any consequence for those students who don't do it correctly, because they're still learning what I want and how I want it. But after a few practices, maybe after an hour or a period if you're teaching secondary, the next day or in the next hour of instruction, I have to be clear with them what the consequences will be for students who don't comply. And then I have to consistently enforce those consequences so that students understand that I'm serious about how I want this and the way it's going to be, so that they all comply the way I want them to comply.
Okay. Any comments? Any questions? Did watching the video a second time help you guys in any way? Okay. It is, yes. I love the image idea. Okay, good. Glad to know. Thank you guys for sharing. All right, so we're going to go back in our breakout rooms. And this time, you are going to discuss what some of your daily operating procedures are. You're going to select a procedure. You're going to select a procedure, and then you're going to agree upon the steps that you're going to do. What will you say? What will you do to teach the procedure? Type out your plan And this be ready to teach the procedure, we're going to skip that part, okay? But we want you guys to have a resource of having gone through the process of how to teach a procedure. So on your breakout room, it will look like this. You're going to go back to your slides. We'll repost that in the chat box. So the directions are on this, on slide 5. And then on slide 6, you have a graphic organizer set up here. So what procedure will we teach this class? You're not going to teach our class today, but just develop a procedure. What steps do we need to teach this procedure? And what will we say to teach the procedure? My advice to you guys as you go through and do this is to keep it simple. Part of your portfolio requirement is possibly to teach a new procedure. Try not to layer it with so many things. Some of the procedures we ask the kids to do have multiple layers. And if you're selecting a procedure that has multiple layers, I'm going to ask that you tune in on just a small piece of it. Pick a small portion of the procedure, pick something simple, pick something that you could teach your students to do in 5 minutes, right? Like when you expect them to walk in, where do you expect them to go put their bags? So when we talk about like how we expect students to walk in, there's a lot of layers to that. Is the door open already? How do we expect the door to stay? What voice do we expect the students to use? Where do the students' bags go? Where do the students sit? What supplies do the students need? So I would, while you guys are doing this, pick one of those mini procedures within the bigger procedure to teach it. Be very specific with the language you're going to use. Be very specific with the type of feedback you can give. If you're going to incorporate pictures, incorporate pictures, okay? Questions for me before we open up the breakout room? I'm going to use it. We walk in line, or we're not grapes. I think that's what they said. I loved this phrase. Where'd it go? We are students, not grapes. We walk in lines, not bunches. Oh, I'm so borrowing that. That is so cute. Would anybody in this really, really talkative group like to give a little feedback on your thoughts about going through this process? You don't have to tell us what procedure you did, but just about your thoughts going through this process. Going on.
I thought it was really interesting to talk with other people and see how different our morning routines are. And so it was really kind of eye-opening how specific our own individual routines are. So I found that was really interesting.
Yes, thanks, Jessica.
So something not really related to this, but we were talking about our struggles this year and just how we all are kind of in the same area. Just simple things. I was in the group of where we were talking about lining up and just the lineup procedures this year. Just like, what is going on this year? Our kids are really seeming to struggle. So it was nice being able to just talk and see that we're all kind of in this together, struggling a bit.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's what this class is all about. Just being able to have those conversations and hopefully, walking away from those conversations with some ideas or knowing you're not alone, right? Anybody else before we move on? Okay, so there's a couple did you knows here. Hopefully you're a fast reader and you can quick read them. Otherwise, we've talked about them. So it's think, pair, share. We talked about that a little bit. And then also the word sort. So you guys can go back and take a look at those. I want to get us on a little break here as soon as possible. I would like you guys to do an assignment right now that is in the Google Classroom. So here's kind of our outline for the rest of the day. This was our longest session, and I'm sure it felt long. It felt long to me. There was so much information about procedures, kind of like what we talked about. We've got to go slow a little bit to get this down so that we can go faster, right? Because this is kind of the meat and potatoes of our classroom. One thing that somebody taught me many years ago, and it's really made a difference in my approach, is not to use LYs on words. So I will not say quietly, silently. I don't use words that end, I don't give directions that end in LY, because there is room for negotiation and interpretation in those words. So I will say more things more like push in your chairs without making noise, line up at the door without using your voice. So I try to be as specific as possible in my directions. Okay, just wanted to share that quick thing with you. So our plan for the rest of our time together is give you guys time right now to complete 5A activity. And it is just a quick write of identify a new procedure that would be most beneficial to teach your students. You can use the one you just did. Justify why that procedure is needed and how often your students will use this procedure.